In the first video, we talked about what a budget is. It is a spending plan for your money, a ticket to financial freedom and financial security. Now let's get practical. Let's talk about how to start building a budget that works for you. Before you can plan where you want your money to go, a budget, you need to know where it's been going. I call this becoming spending aware. Here's how to become spending aware. Track every dollar that you spend over the next 30 days. In fact, if you spend digitally, which most people do through credit card, debit cards, Venmo, Apple Pay, then you have a pretty good record of how you've been spending your money. So I would pull the last 3 months of all of your expenses. It might actually help to print the statements physically that you can make notes on. And I'll tell you why here in a second. Look at how you've been spending money and think of high level categories. Things like housing, transportation, eating out, food. You're gonna start to notice trends. And in fact, I'm more concerned about those trends. I want you to notice those trends. I'm less concerned about the actual category label that you assign to things and more interested that you start to see the trends in your spending. Are you spending more on eating out than you are groceries? Are you spending a lot on transportation? How much are you spending on kids' activities? You want to start to understand the rhythms of your spending. Remember, the goal here is becoming spending aware. We're not changing anything. We're not allocating money at this point. We just really want to observe how you're spending your money. And again, the categories are not that important. What's more important is that you're consistent. You obviously want the categories to be descriptive of the expense, but we just want consistency. Here's where it can get a little bit tricky. So if you're like me, you probably spend a lot at Amazon or Target, and it's really difficult to put those into a category. Just track those for the time being as Amazon or as Target or as Costco, and get a trend line for how much you spend on a regular basis at those different places. Remember, the goal isn't perfection. The goal isn't to change anything. The goal is simply to observe and become aware of your current spending. Awareness is always going to come before change. Now that we've looked at your expenses, we want to look at your income. For those of you who get a consistent salary, you have a really good idea of how much you get paid on a monthly basis, right? How much you get paid is how much you can spend. For those of you who are on a variable income, maybe you get paid commissions, maybe you own a small business and that income is not that steady. A quick hack that I like to recommend to people with variable incomes is deposit all of their money into a savings account and pull a consistent, steady income from that savings account to help you smooth out your income to make it easier for you to plan your expenses. We want to avoid that feast or famine idea, right, when you have variable income. So in essence, what we're doing is we're just averaging your earnings if you have a variable income with that technique, with that hack. All right, so we've looked at income, we've looked at expenses. Let's go back to expenses for a second here. One other thing I want to add is we want to separate our expenses into 2 main categories. I have found that this just helps clear some of the clutter of the expenses because they're all over the place. Typically, there's certain areas where I find people overextend themselves. So basically what we're going to do here by separating these categories is pulling out those areas that tend to be a little bit harder or more chaotic when it comes to our spending. So the 2 categories is what I call fixed expenses and variable expenses. Fixed expenses are going to be consistent both in timing and amount. Things like your mortgage payment or your rent payment, insurance, giving if you give on a regular basis. Debt payments are typically consistent. Utilities, savings, you get the idea. Variable expenses are things that are not consistent, timing or amount. These things are like eating out, groceries, gas. Entertainment can fall into this category. You get the idea, right? Fixed versus variable. The goal here, again, is not perfection. The goal is to continue to see these patterns in your spending. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to look at our total income versus our total expenses. Hopefully, your expenses are smaller than your income. If not, you got a problem. We call that debt. If your income is greater than your expenses, that's good. That's a good place to be. That additional margin, that additional money allows you now to start saving, investing, putting money towards those things that are really important to you. If your expenses are greater than your income, that's okay. We have a starting point. We've now at least become aware of where your money's going. And now we can start being intentional about where it should be going. Whether your spending was greater than your income or not, what I want to encourage you to do is pick one or two of those categories that you created where you feel that maybe you can be a little bit more prudent in your spending, and try to start trimming back a little bit. Making those small adjustments and those small changes can have a huge impact over time. Now, if we go back to video 1, where we identified what was most important to you, that's the area that you want to start allocating your money to. So if you've got that extra margin because you just find out that your expenses are less than your income, we want to start allocating money to those specific things. If you're starting to trim back in some of those areas where you feel like you can be a little bit more prudent with your spending, well, the money that you're trimming back, you want to put towards those things that matter most to you. So let's run through this real quick again before you go to the next video. 3 things I want you to focus on after watching this video. Number 1, track all your expenses. If you can, pull them for the past 90 days. If not, start tracking what you're currently spending money on. Number 2, we want to categorize our expenses, both by type of expense, but then also more importantly, by fixed and variable. And then number 3, we want to start looking for ways to align our spending with those things that matter most to us, those goals that we want to achieve. So in this video, we talked about becoming spending aware. That is step 1 to creating that budget. In the next video, we're going to talk about an equally important part of the puzzle, and that is how do you stick to your budget. Most of us can muster up the will to create or to start this process, but the more difficult part of this is sticking to it and maintaining accountability to a plan that you set out for your money. I will see you in part 3. Plan wisely, live confidently.